Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti with the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and with me today is Zach Pitts, CEO and founding partner of Ganja Goddess. Thank you very much for joining me today, Zach.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on.
All right, before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also do us a big favor by leaving us a positive review on Apple Podcast or whatever platform you listen to us on, or just subscribe to our newsletter. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the cannabis industry?
Oh boy. So I've been in the industry for more than a decade now, and I got in. I basically graduated college into the recession, or right at the very beginning of the recession. And I struggled bouncing around trying to find regular work. I initially I wanted to get into urban planning, which is pretty different from cannabis. And it was at the time where no developers were hiring, all the cities had hiring freezes as well, so I couldn't really get into their urban planning departments. I didn't really know what to do. And so I kind of took up a job with my partner, Tara. She was cultivating and manufacturing edibles, and she had just started and she needed some help. And so I was kind of just helping her as a way to make some money and like desperately survive at this time. And it just kept growing and getting bigger and bigger. And I don't even know when. I've thought about this a lot. At a certain point, I stopped looking for other work. And I was just like, I guess this is my job right now. And even though it was a legal medical market that we were growing and manufacturing in, it was still it had a lot more stigma. I mean, cannabis still has stigma that we're dealing with right now, but it had a lot more stigma back in like 2007, 2008. And so I just, I didn't really tell anyone. And then our edibles had gotten so big that we decided to also open up this delivery service to try to get the edibles to other people in the state of California. And that was in 2011. We opened up the delivery service, and it was driven by two things. One was, we were getting requests for these edibles across the state in places that didn't really have collectives or dispensaries, medical collectives or dispensaries. And we figured we could ship it to them and just not, in a little bit less than traditional retail environment. But then also my partner is a woman, and her experience going into medical dispensaries was, it was a really ugly building, really locked down, bars and gates everywhere, huge security guards, are really intimidating. And she just, she went in and she felt like a criminal, and, it was only young men that she was talking to. And so she wanted something that was, it spoke to her, spoke to why she used cannabis. And she wanted, that was more accepting, that was more open, that was more feminine. And so that's why we came up with Ganja Goddess and as a delivery service, as a way to bring in, maybe older people or women or anyone who isn't that traditional cannabis user, as kind of displayed by popular culture, because it's most of us actually.
Right.
Right. And so and so it's really underpinned kind of how we try to educate our customers, how we try to bring in people who are not as familiar with cannabis but still open to it, really interested in that holistic lifestyle or the conscious consumer. So yeah, that's I guess the genesis of how I got into cannabis.
When you were in cultivation and manufacturing, was it Ganja Goddess back then, or was it a different entity?
So we called our edibles Ganja Goddess, or sometimes we say Ganja Goddess Gourmet. And then our delivery service was called Goddess Delivers.
Okay.
And then we kind of unified it all under one brand, like our branding professionals told us to do, as Ganja Goddess. And so then we've actually, the delivery service took off so much, it kind of came to dominate our efforts. And we still had that in-house brand, but then with the transition over to recreational, we still haven't restarted our manufacturing just
Okay.
yet. But we would kind of use it as, we had deals with oil manufacturers and growers and stuff. So it'd be kind of like an affordable luxury almost, the Ganja Goddess brand. So we'd have the edibles, but we'd also have, which were very traditional edibles. They were like brownies. We also did gingerbread and a couple other things. But what was I going to say? Oh, so it was kind of like a white label, like Trader Joe's brand.
Okay. Okay. So do you have expectations to restart the brand?
Yeah, definitely. Right now we're actually, so the pandemic was huge for us, and I can get into that later, but we did a lot of logistical expansion during the pandemic. But the two things that we haven't done is we haven't really advertised. We've never really done a concerted effort in advertising. Our advertising budget is maybe 1 or 2% of revenue. It's mostly word of mouth and a little bit of SEO that brings new customers to us. So we want to actually advertise, see where that goes. And then we want to expand our edibles line and our manufacturing. We have the license, we just haven't built it out and started it yet. And so we started fundraising, and this is kind of new for us. It was very bootstrapped in the beginning. Back in the kind of like Wild West of the California medical days, you didn't need a lot of money. And there weren't as many regulations, and that was both good and bad, because you were periodically had to deal with cops and conflicting ideas about what the law was. But anyway, so this is a new thing for me, and it's a little bit scary, because I'm good at cannabis. I don't know if I'm very good at being like a salesperson for raising investment funds, but we're trying it out. We've had a little bit of success so far, and yeah, we hope to build out that brand, the vertical, because there are a lot of, there's economies of scale, there's tax implications that benefit us, and it just makes us a little bit more dynamic as a company.
So, oh no. Well, I was curious. Actually, you can go on. You were going to say, but also what?
We're also kind of considering moving into other states as well, because we found a really valuable model that works in California, and we want to expand it in California. And there's a lot of room to expand in California, but we want to try it out in New York as it legalizes, or Virginia, or a couple other states that we're considering.
So is your delivery range all of California?
Yeah, I shouldn't say, technically it's not all. There's federal land. There are some parts near those federal lands that are just so rural that we can't cover it. Like there are parts of California that might have 5 residents in 100 square miles or something like that, and we just can't cover that. But we cover over 94% of the population of California.
How do you do that logistically?
By spending 10 years, I don't know, doing this. It's we create hubs, and we have drivers, and the key is we're not getting someone's delivery to them in an hour or two all over California. It's a scheduled delivery that's next day. And we're able to, with California, I don't know if you know or your listeners might know, but there's a 2-tier licensing system. So you have to be licensed by the state, but you also have to be licensed by your local municipality. And so about half the state doesn't license that. Half the population of the state doesn't live in an area where they have access to retail cannabis at all. And so they have to either drive like 40 miles, or they have to rely on a delivery service, or the illicit market, which is honestly this is part of the reason the illicit market is still so strong in California. Um, but we kind of take advantage of that. We're able to provide for those suburbs, you know, those communities where most communities, at least half the people want to uh, support cannabis. Um, so, there's still a market there. They still want access to cannabis. The law doesn't prevent people from buying cannabis, so we can sell to them.
Mhm.
Um, and we've had a lot of success there.
Is it similar to the old Netflix delivery model where you have like hubs with different product everywhere? So, and is that the way you can do next day delivery?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's in many ways we've tried to emulate e-commerce as closely as we can, um, just because that's what people are familiar with. They feel
Mhm.
comfortable using our website because it looks like an e-commerce website and acts like one. And there's a layer of compliance and law that we have to follow.
Mhm.
Um, that, but we really try to hide the pain points of that from the customer. We try to deal with it as much ourselves so that it's as seamless an experience as possible.
Can you describe your supply chain a little bit to me? So, uh, you know, where are you finding your product?
So we have a number of people that we have relationships with. Uh, some of them from even before recreational was legal, but a lot of them from after. And the industry has changed tremendously over the past 3 years. Um, but so to get back to that, we have a process where a lot of times vendors approach us, um, and we'll take a look at their branding, their packaging, see if it seems like a good fit in terms of our menu, and then we'll accept samples. We really try to get as many as possible and have as many people as possible test these samples to get feedback on whether it's a good product or not. And then we'll try it out. We're very open to customer feedback and customer suggestions. So if someone suggests it, well, it's almost guaranteed we'll carry it if a customer suggested it. But also if customers are like, hey, this is a problem that I had with this product, we'll let the vendor know to see if they can correct it. We'll take that into consideration on whether we continue to carry it. So we're very particular about curating our menu. We have a lot of options, but every single option is something most of us have tried and most of us like.
Hmm. Can you talk about some of your standards when it comes to branding and packaging?
I mean, we're trying to appeal to people who are over 35. We're
Mhm.
trying to appeal to women, and the majority of our customers are over 35. We have a 45 to 55 split women to men, which is a lot more even than most retailers. Um, and so we want something, we don't want something that doesn't take that into account, I guess.
Okay.
Um, we want something that can be appealing to people who are familiar with cannabis as well as people who are unfamiliar with cannabis.
Hmm.
In some ways, I was just had a conversation with my marketing director about this yesterday, but she was talking about how um, it's not like makeup, uh, where a lot of it is just the branding. Branding's important, but when it really comes down to it, it's the product itself.
Hmm.
So as much as we want, so we don't want someone where you have um, scantily clad ladies in the advertisements or something
Right.
like that. We want something that's respectful of its medical origins, that's respectful of the person that's using it. But in the end, it also really does come down to like, is this a product that works well, that is clean and safe? Luckily, the testing regimes very much guarantee that, um, and that people enjoy. That makes people
Mhm.
happy, if not, relieves their pain or anxiety or sleeplessness.
What was the stigma like when you first started, and how has that evolved over the years?
Well, when we first started, no matter how much you tried to argue, like, this is the law, we're allowed to have medical cannabis, there are people who are like, no, this is illegal. What you're doing is absolutely illegal. You're wrong. It's immoral because it's illegal. Talking to my wife's parents, they were not happy when they found out what I did, because they saw it as illegal. It's fascinating how many people looked at cannabis and they were like, well, because it's illegal, it's bad. And didn't kind of look at like, well, why is it illegal? Why did we go towards that when, our founding fathers smoked cannabis and cultivated it. And so so there was that. There was the real fear too of kind of dealing with police, in the sense that the police weren't quite sure what the rules were either. They would seize your assets, seize your product, but then they wouldn't really charge you because they, once they talked to the DA, they couldn't really get a case because it's illegal. It's legal. But then you'd still lose all your money and all your product. And so it was scary. It was stressful. It didn't feel like a real job or a real profession for a long time. And it's tough. It's tough to like, have kids and make commitments to like a longer life when you're in that position. And it's frustrating. Yeah, and honestly, this is only the tip of the iceberg. The number of people who were prosecuted, and we went through terrible interactions with the police, but the number of people who lost their lives to the drug war over cannabis, it's astonishing. And you still read in states where it's illegal of just things where it's just like, this shouldn't have happened. You shouldn't ever have to destroy someone's life. You shouldn't ever have to inconvenience someone's life over cannabis. And it's incredible what kind of, racism and weird morality has done to destroy lives and destroy, the prosperity and success of our people, of American people. So anyway,
Well,
sorry, that's a big rant.
No, it's no, but I believe the same thing. I also believe that what I like to see is when people that have that stigma either use the product, use something that works for them, or there's someone in their life that it has benefited, and how quickly they come to just, oh, really not that bad, actually good. And it's just, and that's kind of what still blows my mind, is it goes from that fervor and anger and being so resolute in it being bad because it's illegal, to just, no, it is a plant that is good for you or can be used to your benefit.
Yeah. And there have been a lot of kind of leaders along the way who have suffered more than anyone in the industry now, and have done more than anyone in the industry now. You think about people like Brownie Mary in San Francisco, helping people with HIV and in some cases cancer as well. You think about that tie of the medical movement into what was happening with the AIDS crisis, into the gay LGBT rights as well, how closely that's tied. You think about, the Black and brown and people of color who were essentially suffering from drugs because people like Nixon and others wanted to kind of repress people of color, and this was a good way to do it, was to go after drugs and just only target them. And it's just, so I have a lot of love and a lot of respect for the people who went before us. And it's tough. It's tough to overcome 100 years of, culture trying to say this is bad.
No, it's very much generational as well.
And
but,
sorry, I meant to mention, it is really, it's heartening to see people come to accept it as well. I understand that, as frustrating as it is for me to be like, "Ah, it's so obvious," people have their own process to come to accept things. And it's beautiful to see people, start to try it out, see where it can provide health, happiness, and bliss to their lives.
Mm-hmm. And I really like the story of it's Brownie Mary, right? Where
Yeah.
they tried to buy the recipe and then she gave it away with her last batch. It's a beautiful story. Um, so I wanted to talk about it's a hard transition back to the supply chain after that, but is there some incentive to get back into cultivation and manufacturing because with your own product you would have a better margin?
Yeah, so we'd have a better margin and we'd be able to sell it for a cheaper price at retail.
Mm-hmm.
There's also all of cannabis has this problem called the 280E tax rule. And basically, we're not allowed to deduct most expenses from our federal taxes, except for the cost of goods sold. Um, and it's devastating for the industry. The federal government is very unlikely to do anything about it before actual legalization, which is infuriating as well. Most people who've been in the industry, essentially, they're just kind of they pay as much as they can in taxes, but they're deferring a lot of it into tax courts and trying to like tie it up, hoping for some change. Because in some ways, it's unsustainable. Um, because you're paying taxes on profits that you just don't have. You don't have that money in hand to like pay the government. And it's even more frustrating because you try to provide benefits for your employees and you can't deduct that from your taxes. Uh, anyway, so it's different than any other business in that sense. And because of that, if you create a vertical, it allows you to shift more costs of doing business into that cost of goods sold. It honestly, it's a confusing and frustrating accounting practice that is one of the ways that helps like allow us to stay solvent,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And so that's why that's a big incentive as well.
How do you stay, how do you work on the accounting side of the business to remain competitive now while also preparing for sort of an unknown but likely inevitable federal legalization?
It's it's tough. I mean, what's interesting is that there's so many benefits to federal legalization, uh, and having that access to just business and banking and society in a way that every other business has access to. Um, and just not having that looming threat, even as it's significantly lessened of prosecution. Um, but there's also the kind of gray market aspect of cannabis has allowed a lot of small businesses to thrive, a lot of family businesses, um, a lot of a marketplace that's very diverse in a lot of states. Not all states. Some states, they give out like 5 licenses, and it's whoever has $100 million or something like that. But so with federal legalization, that's going to entail consolidation, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
inevitable. Um, and that's just part of being a modern economy. It's scary for us, but it's also exciting for us,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of why we've always bootstrapped it, but we're fundraising now because we just want to grow fast enough that we can make sure that we'll be in a position to do what we want to do once federal legalization happens. Um, because you saw a huge amount of money poured into Canada, for instance, when that happened in Canada. And so in the United States, it's going to be 10 times, 100 times that. So yeah.
Do you have a number that you're shooting for in your fundraising efforts?
I think it's pretty small. It's just 5 million.
Okay.
Luckily we're profitable and we've worked out the logistics and we know how to scale it up. So we're trying to take as little money as we can to do as much as the biggest things that we want to do.
Well, I mean, talking about excitement with the business, I read that you had more than 100% growth last year. I mean, is that
Yeah.
specific to the pandemic, or were you already on a growth trajectory and then the pandemic just kind of, blew the lid off?
We were already on a pretty significant growth trajectory. I think it was around 30%.
Mhm.
But what was, but yeah, it was over 100% in the pandemic. And I think, obviously everyone was pushed into delivery, into like trying delivery. It's where the economy was going. You had all the big box stores kind of being decimated by Amazon, but then you even had smaller retailers kind of shifting their models to accommodate online sales and delivery. And then the pandemic hit, and just anyone who was resistant to buying online, suddenly it was like, well, I guess I have to do it now. And
Yeah.
it just changed the mindset. And I think it permanently changed the mindset. Obviously, people are going to be excited to go out and enjoy being in public more. But I think this is something here to stay. But then also, cannabis is the perfect drug for sitting at home, watching TV or chilling, or not, seeing too many people, and to help deal with like anxiety and insomnia that, 3/4 of the nation was dealing with during the pandemic. So, it's great for chilling out, versus, going to a bar or something like that.
Do you expect the gains to continue?
We're not going to have 100% growth rate now. I
Mhm.
think we're still growing, but it's slowed down a lot. Um, I think, but I think it's been a significant shift that is still kind of playing out. And I kind of mentioned Amazon. We're not going to be an Amazon. I think the path for retail online right now is creating a lifestyle brand of something where the menu is curated so people know that they can trust what's there, something that appeals to their lifestyle, what they see themselves as. Um, and you see that in other companies, like for instance, Chewy.com, or Trader Joe's, or even Whole Foods, which is now owned by Amazon. You see it in clothing companies as well. Um, so we're trying to exist in that space of, understanding and being really efficient with the delivery of consumer packaged goods of cannabis, but then also, understanding how to expand that cannabis market, how to take all these people who are cannabis curious but not regular users, and say like, well, this is what you want to accomplish with it. These are the products, and if we can introduce them and make sure they have a positive experience buying and using cannabis, then they're going to become very loyal to us. And we find that 94% of our sales are from customers that are existing customers.
Mhm.
Um, 75% of our sales are from customers who have been with us for 6 months or longer.
Oh, wow.
So people, we can create a lot of loyalty, and we can also expand that entire market of who's not just accepting of cannabis being legal, but actually uses it regularly. And sorry, I had a little beep there. I need to turn that off. Excuse me.
No worries.
Um, yeah. So that's kind of like what we're seeing, and what we're hoping the market will go to.
Okay. Um, I mean, you guys were so uniquely positioned when the pandemic hit. I mean, did you run into any issues? I mean, did you have to staff up? Did you have any problems with, sourcing product? What were some of your pain points?
It was definitely it was tough. It's tough for everyone,
Mhm.
especially at the beginning, because there's a lot of uncertainty about how to be safe.
Right.
Um, I was lucky that my partner, some ways, is a little bit paranoid about things like this, and um, she really put into place very early on safety procedures to prevent spread and to prevent people from getting it from work. We've always had paid sick leave. We extended it significantly for our employees. We've always been very rigorous about, like, if you're sick, you stay home. We'll figure it out, but you stay home. And that helped. There were a couple people who had gotten it at the very beginning and it didn't spread to anyone else. We started doing the mask before the CDC recommended it. We really tried to follow not just the government recommendations, but what the science was saying. In the summer, we switched out all of our filters to make sure that we were filtering out any virus and really cleaning the air with our HVAC system and with space filters, air filters. So there was that. We did have just a huge explosion at the beginning because a lot of people didn't know. They were like, okay, well, they didn't know if delivery would still be around. So a ton of people were ordering a lot. And we had to, while everyone was laying off people, we had to rapidly expand. And we brought in everyone that we could. And it was 3 months of just intensity. 3 months of intensity while I'm also trying to share the load of taking care of my kids at home with my wife and still being present at my job and working until midnight types of things. But we got through it, and I think we're definitely stronger for it.
Did you have any issues with managing the pandemic and bringing on new people? Just from personal experience, as we've hired people and done everything virtually, there's a little bit of difference there between just sitting across the table from somebody and, kind of getting a vibe. It's, I don't know. Did you experience that at all?
It was tough. It's certainly different. Luckily, having something like a video conference to interview people is a lot better than just the phone.
True.
And we were doing, that's how we were hiring at the beginning. I mean, now, all of our employees are vaccinated, and anyone that we hire, we ask them to be vaccinated as well. But at the beginning, it was, we wouldn't let anyone in who wasn't, absolutely needed to be in the office.
Okay.
And it was weird. We relied a lot on referrals by existing employees. So our staff now has a lot of friends of existing employees and or cousins of friends or something like that. So, but you have to just roll with what you have. You have to be considerate of what is dangerous and what is safe, and use the tools available to the best of your ability.
When you talk about, the difference between delivery and retail, you talk about trying to offer advice or recommendations for people based on the experience that they're looking for. How do you do that through a storefront that's a website?
So from the very beginning, my partner, she's a little bit older, and so when we first started, she wasn't as familiar with e-commerce. She'd use it a little bit, but the thing that frustrated her was that she couldn't talk to a person. And so our website would always have in huge lettering the phone number at the very top. We've changed it now, it's a little bit smaller, but we really encourage people to call in. But then, a lot of people, they don't want to deal with talking to someone. So we have a lot of content on our website talking about how to get into different products, how what edible use is versus flower. And we've seen a huge increase in edible use over the past year, which is interesting because flower has always dominated the market, and it really seems like edibles are coming up in a very significant way. But so we have lots of content. We have reviews. We really try to make sure that our listings have as much detail as possible. And we and we'll describe, like, if you're looking for something to deal with this, this is a great product. If you're looking for this other, if you're looking for like pain or anxiety, or you just want to have fun, or you want to be awake or be sleepy, etc.
Okay.
So it's providing as much content as you can.
What's your partner's name? Tara?
Tara.
Um, you talk about menu curation. Have you had issues with vendors in the past, and how have you sorted through those when, maybe quality dipped below your standards?
Yeah, I mean, we usually can develop a pretty good relationship with our vendors. And so if we have a product where we're getting complaints about it, we'll pull it off the shelves, and our vendors will often replace it, or we'll work out some sort of deal to kind of compensate us for what we've had to replace or what we've had to pull off and already paid for. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The vendor wants to continue to be on the website, so they want to fix the problem, and we want to fix the problem. We want our customers to be happy. So in some cases, like, vape pens at the beginning used to be very they were very inconsistent. They'd break all the time, and so we'd always just replace them, no questions asked, and then talk with the vendor and make sure that they're replacing them for us or crediting us. So it's not a difficult thing to do. It takes time and money and effort, but you need to put in that effort.
Do vendors have more of an incentive with an e-commerce solution like yourself rather than trying to be in a retail brick and mortar location?
I think so. I honestly, retail is its own kind of beast in some
Mhm.
ways, and we have a lot of experience. And some vendors, they do have their own retail shops, but we have a lot of experience in what we do, and we know how to do it. And it's whereas there are people who grow flower and will never be amazing growers.
Mhm.
I mean, it's they have their expertise and we have ours. And I say this in the context of, we also want to expand into manufacturing. But we have experience doing that. We know how to do it, and we know how to make a good product with that. So and then honestly, the model that we have of reaching the communities that we can, it's unique, and it's something that a vendor can do it, and they'll have their success where they attempt to do it, but it's going to be a lot harder for them to put the effort and attention into the retail side of covering the entire state, of making an e-commerce side, that I don't know. I don't see much competition in that space.
Is it easier to build brand loyalty, selling through an e-commerce solution? And is it also easier to kind of lose it?
That's interesting. There is, with delivery, an impersonal aspect to it. And so we really try to personalize it. We'll write handwritten notes to customers. Our staff starts to learn, especially those customers that contact us, they start to learn their preferences. And so they know, that John from, Sacramento, he really likes indicas. And so if he calls in, and this is just a fake person, this is not a real person, but
Understood.
if he calls in and asks for, what's new, they're going to know, okay, well, we know he likes indicas. Let's suggest this new indica that we are carrying. So, we really, in our operating procedures, we've really tried to mold it to be, considerate of the customer, considerate of people who are calling, people who are calling in often have a problem. People who are using our service, they often might be in pain, or they might just really need to chill out, and that's why they use cannabis. And to really, like, be accepting of any pain or frustration or whatever they might have, and really welcome them back. And I think that personalization that we try to extend to all of our customers, they appreciate a lot. because you're trying to replicate things in retail stores, and some retail storefronts, they have their models that work for them, and we have our model that works for us. And it's not to say one is necessarily better than the other. But in some retail stores, they're not good at having strong relationships with their customers, but maybe they're really good at doing the transactions quickly, or I don't know. There's something that's allowing them to succeed. So it's people gravitate towards what they want.
Okay. So, what are consumers demanding now in terms of new products, and where might there be some deficiencies in the market in terms of supply?
We've seen a really, really large increase in sleep-oriented products.
Okay.
I think in some ways that can be obvious, that people are having trouble sleeping during the pandemic. People have anxiety and insomnia, and so anything that's branded sleep has seen over a 300% increase in
Oh, wow.
sales.
Okay.
Um, and part of that is because vendors, manufacturers, and cultivators are starting to realize that they can split off their products towards specific kind of like avenues of branding. And so there can be, previously there weren't that many products that were branded purely for sleep. Cannabis is something that you can use for a lot of different things, but you can focus down. There are certain flowers or strains even that are better at inflammation. There are certain strains that are better at sleep. There are certain strains that are better at staying focused and reducing pain. So I think vendors are learning that, and there's opportunity to really get into the details of all the cannabinoids and what they want to accomplish with a product. There's an entourage effect. There's THC is obviously the thing that everyone knows, and CBD as well, but they work better together. And then there's 50 other cannabinoids, minor cannabinoids that change the experience. There needs to be a lot more research, and all of our research tends to be very much kind of like anecdotal, in the sense, we still have a lot of people try things, but there hasn't been a lot of actual scientific investigation of why does this strain make you sleepy and why does this strain make you energetic, and kind of pulling out those threads of information.
You'd mentioned your ability to scale. So, what are your plans to scale as other states come online? Is that in your ambitions?
Yeah, definitely. We have a kind of CBD version of our website, a CBD Goddess, as
Mhm.
well as Ganja Goddess, and we have used that to kind of experiment with what would a national delivery e-commerce solution look like, and to test out different ideas. But also we know what works in California, and we know that we can take our operating procedures. We have familiarity with opening up new licenses and new locations, and move that to another state. State laws differ, and it can be frustrating, some of those differences, but we can adapt to those differences and still maintain the success and why we're successful as well.
Tell me a little bit about CBD Goddess and how big of a percentage of the is it a separate entity or is it part of the same company? And sort of what is the split? How big a chunk of the business is it?
It's a separate entity, and it's a very minor amount.
Mhm.
It's really This is supposed to be um, a playground of sorts, a way for us to test out different features, try to understand how you know going to other states might
Mhm.
work. Um, and we're actually just in the middle of kind of overhauling the e-commerce platform that it's based on as well. But it still obviously works fine right now. And so we started it because we know that there's value in that curation, especially in the CBD market. There's a lot of stuff out there, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there.
Oh yeah.
CBD it can be hard for you to recognize its effects because it doesn't have the psychoactive aspect that THC does. Um, and so we have to be even more careful with the curation of the menu there. And I think we also notice that with CBD, a lot of the times it's a brand that's selling it directly from their website. But there's not, you go to that website and you only get that brand. There's not a diversity of types and vectors for how you take it and um, forms, et cetera. And so that's what we were trying to recreate with the CBD Goddess.
Okay. I noticed that you also are selling CBD pet products. And I can't believe how much interest there is out there for that.
Yeah, and it kind of comes to, I think that I am very respectful of traditional medicine,
Mhm.
but traditional medicine, there pain points and failure points with traditional medicine. Pain management is a very good example. Uh, you know, it's been a disaster.
Yeah.
We have products that are so addictive and are destroying communities, and it's not the fault of the doctors, but this is what they were told, and they were told misinformation. Um, and then these, even if you're not getting addicted, these products, the side effects to them are so extreme that it's a difficult process. My father my father passed away from cancer a couple of years back, and he didn't want to use opiates, and it's like, I don't know how you can be in more pain than he was in.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
just like, and still he'd be like, I don't want it, and I'd just be like, I'd give him cannabis, obviously.
Mhm.
um so people are desperate for that alternative. They're desperate for something that 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 doesn't have those side effects, that doesn't have that addiction, that allows them to function. And so many people have had such success with cannabis. I think in the veterinary field, it's even harder to really get good medicine. There's not a lot of medicine that's designed for pets. And cannabis is, I think they see how much happier and more relaxed their pets are uh, when they use cannabis versus trying to, like, I don't know, shove something, like give them a shot or
Yeah.
force them to
Just
eat something they don't want to eat.
put a tight sweater on it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I think it's also following a trend where there's just a lot more interest in pets right now. There's a lot more interest in treating pets at a higher level as a part of the family. Part of that is just the economic opportunity that's available to millennials and Gen Zers in this country is limited, and a lot of people don't have the opportunity to have kids, and so, but they can have a pet, and that provides a certain level of companionship. It's not the same, but it's something. um so I think it's the growth of pets is there are underlying problems with society, and cannabis use for health and for happiness and all that kind of stuff is a symptom of that. And that's not to say, like, if we had a perfect society, people definitely would still use cannabis because it's fun and it helps with pain. And a perfect society isn't going to perfectly deal with every medical issue that we have. Um, but I think the situation that we're in the United States makes it a lot more attractive.
Uh, your story about your father hits really close to home because that was sort of my personal connection that brought me into understanding really the potential of cannabis. Was I had a family member fighting cancer, and she had a bag of pharmaceuticals, that she just took all day, every day, and literally was able to get rid of all of the chemo drugs, like medicine and pain relievers, just using cannabis. And that was what blew my mind.
And everyone who's been in this industry for a long time, I got in before my father got cancer, but we all have stories like that.
Hmm.
My partner Tara, she started using cannabis in the first place just as, like, something to help deal with some pain that she had in her knees. But then she had a friend who had cancer, and she started making these brownies for them. And she was just kind of growing it herself and making the brownies because she preferred edibles to smoking. And it really helped that person. And at the very beginning, we were doing everything ourselves. I was doing customer service, I was driving it to people, stuff like that. But I'd take calls from people who were just, it was, cannabis was like a miracle for them. They, I remember talking to this, he was a teenager. No, he wasn't. He was in his early 20s, but he had a medical card and his parents were helping him get cannabis, even though he was over 18. And he had stomach cancer, and it was just, the suffering that he went through with that and the change that happened when he'd take cannabis. I would just, I talked to him and I'd like weep afterwards, but it's incredible to see how much hope it gave him in some ways of feeling normal again.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to end on you. Ganja Goddess recently released your cannabis consumer trends report. Was there anything interesting or that you found particularly shocking when the data came back?
Well, for me, it's not as shocking because I'm immersed in the
Yeah,
world
you're
of
seeing it day to
cannabis,
day.
and yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's in some ways it's almost confirming my assumptions and biases about the industry. It really kind of showed how many more people are moving over to delivery. It's really showed how the reason I talk about medical so much is because most legal states, they have a medical and recreational market, and they'll have like some differences in what medical patients can do versus recreational patients. Everyone who uses cannabis on some level uses it for medical, regardless of their status. Sometimes but mostly it's self medicating. It's dealing with a little bit of pain, it's dealing with a little bit of anxiety. It's really needing, from a mental health perspective, to just chill.
Right.
So I think that's what's most interesting about these surveys that we've been doing, is that it's showing how, like, yeah, I'm smoking cannabis, and this is how I am too. I smoke cannabis because I want to have fun, I want to relax and enjoy it. But then also, it's great that it helps with my sleep. It's great that if I've been having back pain or something like that, or my wife has been having back pain, that I can rub a topical into her shoulders, stuff like that. So I think that's what's most interesting. And then obviously, the radical increase in sleep branded items, the increase in interest in edibles.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that edibles, like you had mentioned previously, overtook flower as the most popular product category. Is that something? Are there enough edible manufacturers out there right now to keep up with demand?
I'm not sure it's overtaken flower. It's very
Okay.
close
Oh, okay.
in our sales. There's always opportunity, or I think there's still opportunity in this business, and I think it can be both in flower and in edibles. I think we found a lot of really good edibles manufacturers, but I don't, this is still a new market.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone has an idea about how to do it, if someone is excited about it and passionate about it, I think they can make a product and probably succeed with it.
I also read that vaping is on the downslope. Is that something that has been consistent since the vaping crisis?
Yeah, there was a big drop after the vaping crisis, but not as huge of a drop as I think people have seen. And I think what happened was, people who were vaping were those who were uncomfortable or just didn't like smoking. There's a lot of stigma behind smoking for good reason because of what the tobacco industry has done, and the harm that cigarettes have caused. Um, and so I think people who were vaping are probably moving over to edibles. It's unfortunate because a lot of the vaping that is out there, it's very different than what the kind of like Vapegate crisis was over. There were additives that really weren't being used in the legal market before, and definitely are not being used now, like the vitamin E acetate that were causing these types of problems. But I think also, uh, it's tough. I think there's a couple different effects. Vape was great also because you could travel with it. It was more discreet, but edibles have gotten to the point where they can be discreet as well. I think I think it's a little bit unfortunate. I kind of prefer smoking in some way and ingesting it in my lungs, just because it's so much easier to dose. And maybe the regulations on edibles have helped that, though, because edibles regulations prevent it from being too strong. And so a lot of people, when they first try cannabis, they'd start with an edible, they take way too much and get way too high, and it's unpleasant. So that could also be a factor to it as well.
Okay. What are your expectations for the industry? What states do you see coming online next, and what are your expectations for federal legalization?
Obviously a lot of states have already started discussing it or made it legal just this year. Virginia has is right up there. New York and New Jersey just happened. I think legalization, at least on the state level, it both happens faster than you expect and slower than you expect. The laws get fast quickly, and then the implementation is slow.
Right.
So as states kind of come on, it's very exciting that they passed the law, but the business side of things is going to be slow, and it's going to take a couple years for them to fully flesh out the regulations. I don't know what Congress is going to do. They have the prerogative, they have the desire, but our governing institutions have been broken for a little while. They're not very good at accomplishing anything.
Right.
Even the most important things like how to deal with the coronavirus has been taken much longer than it should have and been much more contested than it should have. And I think the same thing with cannabis. It's great that so many people in the Senate and in the House are really behind this. But it's hard to really say when it will pass. And unfortunately, I really respect that Schumer is so invested in cannabis becoming legal, but his desire to do an omnibus bill and not pass those immediate needs that we have, and try to fold everything into an omnibus slows things down and it hurts people. For banking, for instance, like the fact that we can't do banking means that we are so much more of a security risk that we have. There are cannabis companies that are just, they're moving hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's just not safe. They don't need to. We have ways to overcome that.
Yeah.
And it's a bill that just hasn't been presented to the Senate, and it may not be because it might be folded into an omnibus. And that's not to say, there aren't a lot of things to figure out. We've had 100 years of keeping cannabis illegal. There's a lot of our institutions are built around that, and we have to unweave that. There are people's lives who are destroyed, and we have to compensate them and restore them to their previous lives. We need to release prisoners. We need to make sure that it's safe. We need to unify interstate commerce. It's complicated. I understand that, and I don't expect it to be easy. But those things that have been worked out, such as banking, those things that we know we can do immediately with only benefits, I really hope that they pursue those quickly, or more quickly than the omnibus.
Well, Zach, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, man. I really do appreciate your time. Just thank you. It's been enlightening.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of fun talking with you, and happy to come on again if you ever need me.
Oh, that'd be excellent. Well, thank you very much. For Zach, I'm David Manti with Cannabis Equipment News, and we'll catch you again next week. Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News podcast.